like to call on our Assistant City Administrator, Michael Fisher, to lead us in the pledge. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have an approval to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Grower. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously. I would like to state for the record that Councilmember Judy and Councilmember Palermo are not in attendance this evening with an excused absence. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the FY 2020 budget for the City of Roswell. Mr. Luckett, or I'm not sure who's presenting tonight, but one of our able-bodied finance people. And Mr. Davidson is going to read the budget.
Thank you. This is an ordinance adopting a budget for the fiscal year 2020 for each fund of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to Article 6, Chapter 6 of the Charter of the City, beginning July 1st, 2019, and ending June 30th, 2020, appropriating the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the item of anticipated funding sources, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures from exceeding actual funding sources, and amending the Code of Ordinances to effectuate such adoption. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance, the text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this would be the second reading.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council members. Before I start my presentation tonight, this budget is the culmination of a collaborative effort of several people, and I would like to take a minute to thank all those that have been involved. First and foremost, ma'am, thank you to you, and thank you to all the council members for being supportive of us all through the process. Second, I would like to thank our City Administrator, Mr. Gary Palmer, our Deputy City Administrator, Mr. Michael Fisher. Thank you so much to both of you for being supportive and for the trust and confidence that you have bestowed on us throughout this process. And I would also like to take a minute to thank all the department heads and the staff that have been involved in this process. They have done an amazing job considering the fact that we have used a new budget software this year. They have been very patient and very supportive throughout this process with us. And last but not the least, I would like to thank Lynn Williams, Lacey Smith, and our director, Ryan Luckett. This would not have been possible without the three of them. They do a tremendous job. They have worked very hard throughout this process, and I cannot thank them enough. So I'll jump on to the presentation now. In tonight's presentation, we will review the budget principles that we follow each year for the development of the budget, provide a summary of the operating budget for the general fund, and then discuss the adds and deletes that budget staff has received from the council members. Among the budget highlights, the FY 2020 budget is balanced. The budget primarily focuses on maintaining the existing service levels and infrastructure, pending the completion of the citywide strategic plan. Then we have $28.5 million budgeted for capital projects. We also have an average of 3% wage increase for all full-time employees, part-time staff, and firefighters. And then we have close to $600,000 in savings through operational efficiencies and redirection of resources in the FY 2020 budget. Moving on to the budget principles, each year the City of Roswell's budget is developed based on the three principles that we adhere to. Our first principle is to have a balanced budget where revenues are greater than or equal to operating expenditures and maintenance capital. We also maintain a reserve of 25%, which is greater than or equal to 3 months of operating expenditures. And the third principle is that we use the reserves for only one-time capital. Moving on to the general fund operating budget. So this pie chart here gives you a summary of the proposed revenues for FY 2020. And as you will see, the total revenues that we have budgeted are $77.1 million. And then of that, sales tax and property tax make up the largest sources of revenue for general fund at a total of 65%. And business taxes are estimated to come in at $16 million, and other revenues have been budgeted at $9 million. On this slide, we have a breakdown of the proposed general fund operating expenditures by department. Police, recreation and parks, administration, fire, transportation, and admin make up a major portion of that. That is 87% of the total $72.8 million budget. This slide provides an accounting summary of the general fund proposed operating budget. The FY 2020 beginning fund balance in the general fund is estimated to be a little over $3.7 million. The proposed revenues for the next fiscal year are a little over $77 million, and the proposed base budget is at $70.1 million. The requested program changes for FY 2020, or the operating requests as we like to call them, are $2,657,462, and the proposed maintenance capital expenditures are $4,265,965. The program changes and the maintenance capital combined give us a total proposed operating request of $6,923,427. So the total proposed operating budget is $77,115,496, which is the same as the proposed revenues. And of the beginning fund balance of $3,741,000, $3,195,802 is being used for one-time capital, and $517,450 is allocated for the increase in the general fund reserve. Here we have a summary of the proposed general fund one-time capital. We have $1,425,000 in available fund balance in the capital projects fund, and we are reprogramming $260,000 from 2 current capital projects. We are also transferring $3,195,802 from the general fund, and I mentioned that in the previous slide. $250,000 is proposed to be transferred from the tourism product development portion of the hotel motel fund. That gives a total available one-time capital funding of $5,130,802. So the total funded one-time capital requests are also at the same amount as the available funding level, leaving us with 0 funds. So moving on to the add-delete proposals for this second budget reading. On this slide, we have a summary of the general fund operating budget based on the proposed adds and deletes received from council members. And the total adds, as you will see, equal to the total deletes. So the revenues equal the operating expenditures, and there is no change in the general fund balance available for one-time capital. It stays at the $27,748, and the total proposed adds and deletes is $62,410, and I will list those out in the next couple of slides. So among the adds for the second reading, we have the Roswell Arts Fund, proposing to add back $45,000 there. And then for the historic Roswell beautification project, there is a proposal to add back $4,000 for the Elizabeth Way storefront landscape cleanup. And then there is also a proposal to add back $5,000 to the HRBP Roswell Historic District streetscape improvement. $4,500 to be added back to the holiday decorations for the historic district. This is again in the historic Roswell beautification project. And then there is also a proposal to add back $3,910 for the decorative banner project by the historic Roswell beautification project. So that is the total adds of $62,410. And among the deletes, we have $62,410 coming out of citywide road resurfacing and reconstruction. And then we also have one proposal to repurpose funds, some of the general operating funds, and that is a total amount of $475,000. And this is basically the repurposing of the auto rental excise tax funds from promotion of industry, trade, and commerce to recreational facilities. So the net impact of that will be $0. So as part of our next steps, we will have the adoption of the millage rate that has to be set yet, and that is contingent upon us receiving the preliminary digest from Fulton County, and we still do not have any news on when we will be getting that. So as soon as we know, the dates will be proposed for the millage rate hearing, and they will be put out on our website, so please look out for that. And that is the end of my presentation, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Does council have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Grower.
So I do have a question on the add delete for the 62,410. I spent a lot of time with transportation today, and I could not find a way to support removing $62,000 from the citywide road resurfacing and reconstruction project to move it to these things. We've been talking about this, and I guess the question for you guys is, it sounds like we have about $27,000 that we can allocate to this currently. Is that correct?
Yes, so we could do that. So we have the $27,748. Yeah, $748 that could be allocated towards these ads.
Okay, so when it's time to make a motion, I think I'd like to take that offer to take the $27,748, and then also take the remainder of that $62,000 from building maintenance budget that we fully funded, with the hope that we can return that halfway at mid-year at this point. But I can't support removing it from the road resurfacing program at this time.
Thank you, Councilmember Grower. Additional comments, questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. On the same topic, as much as I like to support outside organizations for good causes, I cannot support at the cost of the much-needed citywide road resurfacing and reconstruction, since roads are aging across Roswell, and we need as much as possible for maintenance capital.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. Additional questions from council? I'll make a comment myself. I attempted to propose a budget that funds as much as we can to our maintenance projects. My attitude going into this budget was keeping things level. I think our department heads did a great job not creating any new initiatives and not increasing their budget. I would also like to thank Roswell, Inc., who did not ask for any additional funding this year. I was very excited about that. But I just think it's inappropriate that we ask our department heads to stay at a level budget, but we allow our partner organizations to increase their budgets. So that was my reasoning when I came into this. The other thing I would like to say is that two of the biggest items that we deal with on a regular basis in the city of Roswell are sidewalks and potholes and road resurfacing. So I personally don't want to get behind on that. Right now we're at a 20-year cycle on a road resurfacing. If we don't fund that completely, we will drop further behind. And I think that it's very important to remember that with the age of our city, maintenance is extremely important, and that includes building maintenance. We don't have new and shiny here. We are maintaining what we have built over the years, and I think that is our number one priority in the city other than public safety. So I appreciate council supporting most of the budget as presented. I appreciate staff working so hard on this. And I also appreciate council reducing that, the Arts Fund from $65,000 to $20,000, but I would also like to hear the thinking on this because, like I said, it is not as though, for example, the Arts Fund, we are funding that at $225,000. We're not pulling funding. We're not asking them to go to zero funding. We're not saying, oh, no, arts aren't important. We're saying they're very important. We're funding them. We're funding Roswell, Inc. We're funding the CVB. We're funding Beautify Roswell. I am just asking that this council does not increase those partner organization budgets since we are asking our department heads not to increase their budgets. Thank you. Additional comments from council? Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to say I also support 100% investing in our capital maintenance and resurfacing of roads and our building facilities. I think that's very important that we continue investing in our assets. I do think it's also very important that we invest and support our partner organizations because these are individuals and citizens who have come forward with initiatives, and I believe that showing our support for their efforts is also very important. The Arts Fund asked for $290,000, so we have cut their budget, their ask, by $20,000 as well. So I think that, they are giving something, and I think this is very important to support their initiatives that they have planned for the year ahead. I'd also like to say that I do support Councilmember Grower's suggestion of allocating the funds from the building maintenance budget, which we can add to mid-year as needed. Thank you.
I would like to point out that the mid-year budget will also be competing for dollars. And like I said, I think that our message that we send to our department heads should be the same message that we send to our partner organizations. Like I said before, it's not as though we have stopped funding. It's not as though we have reduced funding. We just want to keep funding at a level playing field in this budget cycle. So any additional comments from council? Okay, I'll open it up for the public. Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, ma'am.
Janet Russell. Sorry I came in a little bit late, but I happen to agree with the mayor in this case. We don't always agree, but I think if you're going to cut the budget or ask people to control their budget within the city, I think we need to do the same with partner organizations. There's virtually no oversight onto how they spend the money. There's no inclusivity from the city. They don't ask the residents who are funding them. One of the council people just said, they were asking for $290 and we're only giving them $235. Well, gosh, they should ask for $500. Then we would have only given them the $400. That's not, it's kind of like when you sell a house, you ask $1 million and you get the bid for $750. You really only wanted $5, but you'll take $750. Well, okay. So I think that we have so many needs in this town. I love the arts more than anybody. I love sculpture. I feel like I live in an industrial reclamation site right now with the sculpture that's all over this town of steel beams that tell us no stories. And there's never been, to my knowledge, just as an example, hey, these are the top 20. Why don't we have a vote among the citizens who are funding it? Nope, nothing. So I think you need to step back, and I think we need to watch. I could give you 20 things that could use money right now. And Roswell's running way behind in infrastructure maintenance, way behind. I'm all over Metro Atlanta, and when I go see towns that are basically nothingness, they were nothing, and now they have every detail is perfect, and I come home and I love living in this town, but I feel like I've stepped into a third world country in parts of it. Now, no, not in gated subdivisions. No, I live in the real town, the downtown. Broken sidewalks, lights that don't work, a fountain on the town square that hasn't been running again. It's as dark as a tomb over there every single night because the Roswell Beautification Project got $50,000 from us and then asked us for $15,000 as a match, and illuminated the trees, which are worthless now because the leaves are out. So I'm just asking you, you need to watch the money, but watch it in the right places. You're not selling a house. You're not going to ask for the most, and then that's what you think, whether it's the beautification project, Roswell Inc. To date, I think we've given Roswell Inc. almost, $4 million? $4 million, but when they started, they were supposed to be self-sufficient after the first year. And we gave them $467,000 at that work session. I recall it very clearly. You will be self-sufficient after the first year. 5 years later, $4 million, they're not self-sufficient either. So as a taxpayer, I hear it all over this town. What is going on with the city and their money? Because if I hear crying poor one more time, we don't have any money. Yeah, we do, but there's an old Irish saying, everybody folds their money differently. And that's how this city is folding their money. Not in very good ways, I'm afraid, and putting it in the wrong wallets.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Seeing no one come forward or hands up, I'll bring it back to council. Any additional questions or comments from council? Okay, well, I will be looking for a motion. Do we have a motion on this budget?
Excuse me. So this is including this add and delete or not? What is the add and delete situation?
Your motion includes whatever you want to and whatever you don't want to.
Okay. So, like I said, as much as I like the support outside organization for the good cause, capital maintenance comes first. Departments have been asked, echo here, the mayor, have been asked to do the maximum effort to have a tight, reasonable, and productive budget. So I don't see why not to also ask the same thing to the outside organizations who they're already receiving taxpayers' money. It's not that they're not receiving anything. So they are receiving, and they even have a better advantage of departments, is that they have access to private donations. So they can always, the benefit of the outside organization is not only to be funded by taxpayers' money, but also they have access legally to private donors to either match what the city is putting or exceed what the city is contributing to the outside organization. So in order to be eventually self-sufficient organizations. So they need to explode this great benefit that they have by being an outside organization to receive private donations. So my motion will be for the budget without the latest add and delete, and it's just the budget have been presented by the mayor. So that is my motion tonight. Motion to approve the budget without the recent presented add and deletes. So the 475 does not have a net zero impact. So it's just how you're going to be accounting on the general fund the money. So I don't know if it has zero.
Let me suggest that we split that into two motions because they're two very different items regarding the budget. So you've got a motion to approve the budget as originally submitted by the mayor. We'll deal with the 475 separately in the second motion, whoever would entertain making that. Do we have a second? It fails for a lack of second. Is there someone else that would like to make a motion?
Motion to approve the budget with the following changes. The $27,748 goes to the add and deletes, and the remainder of those add and deletes are taken from the maintenance budget to be revisited at mid-year to replenish that if funds exist.
We've got a motion by Councilmember Grower. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it carries with Councilmember Wilsey, Tizer, and Grower. All those opposed, Councilmember Zapata. Now we'll entertain a motion regarding, and if you would please, let's revisit what the 475, what we're talking about, moving that. If you would re-educate us, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, Mayor. So this money comes from our auto rental excise tax, which is governed by state law, and by state law, we're only allowed to use it for a certain number of purposes. One of those is for the promotion of industry, trade, and commerce, and that was what was included in the proposed budget, that this would go to help fund the activities of Roswell Inc. The proposal that Councilmember Zapata has put forward is to repurpose these funds so that they're being used instead for recreational facilities, which is also an allowable use under state law of these funds. As he stated, it has a net zero impact to the budget. It's just we do need to designate what purpose we're using these funds for, so we're just kind of switching purposes from what was initially included in the proposed budget.
Thank you, Mr. Luckett. And please refresh my memory that we need to make the distinction this evening. We could not broaden the description and say that it could be for trade and commerce and recreational facilities, and then this council would vote on specific projects to spend this money on?
We could broaden the description. I don't see any issue with that unless Mr. Davidson does, but I think that as long as it's inclusive of allowable uses, then that would be fine.
Okay, Mr. Davidson, those are all eligible projects. Anything sizable would have to come back to this council for funding, correct?
Correct.
So if this evening we just broaden that definition, and then these all come back to council for allocation of funding, we do the same thing. Is that correct?
Well, these wouldn't necessarily come back to council for funding because essentially we're, the council is just designating what these funds would be used for. But through the approval of the budget, you're authorizing the dollar amounts to be spent for Roswell Inc. and anything that's already included in the budget for recreational facilities. And in this case, I think we were considering debt service for some of the rec facilities, such as the Seven Branches property or the Chafin Road property that these funds could go for. So all of those could be spent without having to come back to council because they're included in the proposed budget.
Okay, help me through this.
Okay.
I'm a little confused. Okay, so as it was stated, auto rental excise tax funds from the promotion of industry, trade, and commerce. So it was put in industry, trade, and commerce. Councilmember Zapata suggested recreational facilities. But you're telling me right now, unless I misunderstood this, that the 475 does include recreational facilities and it does include industry, trade, and commerce. Is that correct?
It could, if the description is broadened to include both of those things, that would work just fine.
Well, and let me ask you this, Mr. Luckett. Could we stipulate that this $475,000, when we allocate those funds, that it does come back to this council for allocation?
Could stipulate that. Typically in the past, I mean, these are just obligations that the council's already approving through the budget and they would be spent as approved.
Okay, so it would serve our best interest really to broaden that definition to include recreational, because I know that a lot of our recreational facilities are at the top of our priorities.
I think that would work.
So that would give us the opportunity, or I should say, give you all the opportunity to fund the projects that we have prioritized in both of those categories.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Luckett. I think I got it now. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if, for clarification, the Finance Department can read all the different usage allowed by state law regarding auto rental excise tax fund, please. So this will give us an idea of how can we invest this money and still pay from the general fund Roswell Inc. It's not that we are unfunding Roswell Inc. It's just that we're saying that this excise tax will be specifically used for other than Roswell Inc., they will still get the money from general fund. So we're not cutting any funds to Roswell Inc. We're just saying that this particular fund will be for recreational facilities improvements. And I don't know if, just to give an example, could be the historic homes part of that investment.
Essentially, so you're right that, I mean, making this change doesn't change anything on the expenditure side and wouldn't change anything for staff. The money would still be spent as is included in the proposed budget. It's really just a minor detail of, whichever way the council wants to go in terms of how to designate those funds. But I do have the law in front of me that says what it can be used for. It includes promoting industry, trade, commerce, and tourism. It includes capital outlay projects consisting of the construction of convention, trade, sports, and recreational facilities or public safety facilities, including the acquiring, constructing, renovating, improving, and equipping of parking facilities, pedestrian walkways, plazas, connections, and other public improvements associated with such conventions, trade, sports, and recreational facilities, or public safety facilities, or the retirement of debt issued with respect to such capital outlay projects, and the maintenance and operation expenses or security and public safety expenses associated with capital outlay projects funded pursuant to the subparagraph listed above.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wilsey.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Luckett, could you please explain, I guess, the significance of the $475,000? Is that the projected amount from auto rental, the excise tax funds?
Yes, it's the combination of what was collected in FY 2019, which was unspent, and then what we expect to collect in FY 20.
Okay. All right. I mean, and just a comment, I mean, to me, it makes sense to have funds that are earmarked and coming from, the economy and businesses to be earmarked back to investing in industry, trade, and commerce.
Well, I would like to say that our historic assets are very important to our economy. So I do agree that recreational facilities, particularly our historic homes, are a key role in attracting business, attracting visitors, all of the above. I think our historic homes, along with everything else, help us to be a vital community that people want to locate in, people want to visit to, people want to locate their businesses in and their homes. So I would support that this go for either or. I have one question, or I should say and. I've got one question for you. Okay, so we are fully funding Roswell Inc.
Correct.
So would this be $475,000 on top of what we're fully funding, with no questions asked?
No, this is part of what we're funding Roswell Inc. at. This is
Okay,
not in
so
addition to the 560.
So we would pull less money out of the general fund because we have the 475 designated to this.
That's as it is currently reflected in the proposed budget.
So my question then is, with our other priorities, for example, historic homes, could those be funded additionally out of the general fund if this money goes into Roswell Inc.?
Nothing will change in the funding levels for anything in the proposed budget based on this change that we're talking about right now. Every proposal will be funded as is reflected today, so nothing changes on the expenditure side. No one will get more or less funding depending upon how the council votes on this item.
Okay, let me just clarify my question because I realize I'm probably not asking the right question. If we designate this 475 to Roswell Inc., that's $475,000 that will not come out of the general fund, correct?
Correct.
So what kind of latitude do we have in reallocating the 475 out of the general fund that we just saved by pumping this money into it? Can we use it for various projects? Could it be a mid-budget process where we have additional funds in the general fund and we could fund some of our historic home improvements? How would that work?
So technically there will be no additional funding available to allocate to new projects because the proposed budget as is reflected today already this 475 goes into the general fund to pay for these items, to pay for Roswell Inc. So by designating the money to Roswell Inc., it doesn't change anything. It doesn't free up other funds. Essentially, those funds were already freed up in the proposed budget, if that makes sense.
Okay, so with the proposed budget, this 475 was already factored into what we can allocate to Roswell Inc.
That's correct. It freed up other
Thank
general
you.
fund dollars.
I knew I wasn't asking the right question. Thank you. Additional questions from council? Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just, a philosophical technicality. Either you believe that Roswell Inn should be funded from the general fund, or do you want to entitle Roswell Inc. to claim the car rental excise tax this year and moving forward? It's just this philosophical technicality. You believe it had to be funded 100% from the general fund, or you want to allocate a specific tax from in the city to give it to Roswell Inc. That is the main key of this issue.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. And I don't want to interpret your words, but what I think you're saying is, while this would be allocated on an annual basis during the budget process, correct?
Yes.
You're concerned about setting the precedent of allocating that to Roswell Inc., so it sends a message to Roswell Inc. in the future that they always get these funds. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, that they would be entitled to this tax, specific excise tax.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. Additional questions, comments from council? Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Do we have a motion?
So my motion, that probably won't go through, but I will do it anyway, is to allocate the $475,000 of the car rental excise tax to the recreational facilities.
We have a motion by Councilmember Zapata. Do we have a second? The motion fails for a lack of second. Is there an alternative motion?
Motion to deny.
A motion to deny by Councilmember Grower. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Councilmember Tizer. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes. Councilmember Wilsey, Tizer, and Grower. All those opposed? Councilmember Zapata. I would like to thank staff again. I would also like to thank council for approving this budget. I think that we have presented a great budget, and I am very proud of what staff has done. And I'm very excited going forward. I think we have our priorities straight. We still have things to iron out. Well, that's going to be an ongoing thing. But I'm very excited about this budget. And like I said, I thank council for approving it. And I would also like to thank staff for working so diligently on this. The next item on the agenda is Administration of Finance Department. Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 2 of today's agenda, approval of an amendment to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell regarding Chapter 10, Article 10.2, Hotel Motel Tax. This is the second reading.
Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 10, Licenses, Taxes, and Business Regulations, Article 10.2, Hotel Motel Tax of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. Chapter 10, Licenses, Taxes, and Business Regulations of the Roswell Code of Ordinances is hereby amended by deleting Section 10.2.2 in its entirety and substituting a new Section 10.2.2 to read as follows. Text of which is incorporated herein by reference. And Chapter 10, Licenses, Taxes, and Business Regulations of the Roswell Code of Ordinances is hereby amended by deleting Section 10.2.3 in its entirety and substituting a new Section 10.2.3 to read as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference. And Chapter 10, Licenses, Taxes, and Business Regulations of the Roswell Code of Ordinances is hereby amended by deleting Section 10.2.10 in its entirety and substituting a new Section 10.2.10 to read as follows. Again, the text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this is the second reading.
Mr. Luckett.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item is the second reading of an update to our hotel motel tax ordinance. As you might remember, the council approved a resolution requesting an increase to the hotel motel tax rate back in January. This was approved by the state legislature, and the last step in this is to update our ordinance. This ordinance change simply updates our rate from 6% to 8%. It changes our ordinance to be in conformity with the state law and in terms of how the funds are used, and it also sets an effective date, which would be July 1st, 2019. And I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Does council have any questions? Mr. Luckett, could you also review where we are in the mix of things with our sister cities in North Fulton?
Yes, so we are currently, we were one of the lowest tax rates for hotel motel tax rate. With this change, it puts us more on par with our surrounding cities. So the city of Alpharetta has an 8% tax rate. Sandy Springs is at 7%. A lot of the other counties, Cobb County, Gwinnett County, are already at 8%. So puts us closer to where a lot of our surrounding jurisdictions are.
Thank you, Mr. Luckett. Does council have any questions? Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Before I ask for a motion, I would also like to thank our state legislators for putting this through at the state level and allowing us to make this decision. I feel as though it's a good decision, and we are no longer leaving money on the table. The hotel motel tax is a pass-through tax that is funded by folks staying in the hotels and motels. I'll tell you, in my travels, I have never decided to stay at a hotel because their tax rate is 0.5% lower than another area, so I really think that this is a good move on our part. Do we have a motion?
Yes, we do. Motion to approve item number 2.
Motion to approve the second reading by Councilmember Zapata. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All those in favor, please raise your hands, and it passes unanimously. Thank you. Back to you, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So, item number 3, approval of a resolution to establish and adjust fees for community development rates.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'm going to turn this over to our Deputy Director for Community Development to speak about the proposed changes to their fees.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Lenore Bromberg, Deputy Director of Community Development. Before you tonight is a look at establishing the fees for the community development permitting that come through our department. On you, in front of you on the screen are planning and zoning fee updates, just the changes that we proposed that you've seen several times now. We've also got our engineering fees that are, as discussed immediately following our last committee meeting on May 14th. That includes the engineering fees as well as the building permit fees, which I will get to as I continue on. And currently in the budget that you just approved, there is an estimation of $200,000 additional revenue based on those fee changes. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about these changes.
Yes, Councilmember Grower.
I want to thank you for bearing with us as we work through all these and finalizing, or at least arriving at and getting it to this far in the meeting. I know it's been a lot of work and a lot of math, and thank you for all the detailed information to help us make this decision.
Thank you, Councilmember Grower. Councilmember Tyser.
Thank you, Mayor. Same here, Ms. Bromberg. I know we ran you through a lot of versions of it, and I think you landed on a good one.
Thank you, Councilmember Tyser. Additional questions? Yes, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, great initiative to bring forward the update of the well past overdue update of the fees. I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Do the proposed new fees for community development cover the current cost for the city to provide the unique services to only those who request this kind of services?
These do not 100% cover all of staff time and resources. It's just a partial recovery of those funds in order to allow us to continue to do business.
Okay, so this will lead to my second question. How these services will be subsidized?
I don't have an answer to that question.
So the services would be funded through other revenues that come in through the general fund. These are all general fund funded services, so that would include sales tax, property tax, our other licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, all of the other revenues that we receive in the general fund.
So all these funds that you are mentioning to subsidize this one will take away from other purposes?
That is correct. If these revenues don't cover the full cost of the services, then yes, they would have to be funded through other revenue sources.
Okay, either increasing those taxes or millage rate, or cutting some services, or some other way to subsidize these particular services used by unique individuals applying to use these services. So I have the impression that they will be subsidized by regular taxpayers' money. So I don't know why they're not covering at least the minimum cost of providing the service. I understand that even will be worse in the future if more regulations come from the federal or state level that will make us do even more services or have more people to provide, the inspections or any other services. So it might even be worse down the road if the new legislation will require us to provide even more services or more detailed services. So I don't think that not covering the cost is responsible, especially it's something that, it's not request or required to use across the city. Not everybody will ever use this, but everybody will be subsidizing in a way these services for these particular individuals or companies who request these services. So I don't think it's fair from the regular taxpayer point of view.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. Additional questions? Councilmember Wilsey?
No. I would just say, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the community development function and providing engineering services and planning and stormwater management, traffic management is a part of the services that the city provides to the citizens. So that is why that's where the cost of the services are covered through our professional employees, our professional staff, and the additional fees onto the applicants, the developer or the homeowner who is asking to modify their property, are just in addition to and in an attempt to kind of defray some of those costs and kind of help balance it out. And correct me if I'm wrong or expand on that. I appreciate it.
I was going to say the same thing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Grower.
Every single one of these applications or fees that's paid is likely to turn into additional tax revenue, right? That's kind of the principles behind community development. And so I think it would be short-sighted for us to charge through the nose for our fees to stop people from coming to this city, because the tax revenues are going to far outweigh what we're spending to staff this process. So I don't think that's the right way to look at it, given that the hope is that after an application, it's going to lead to additional tax revenue, which is going to help the city out.
Councilmember Tizer.
Thank you, Mayor. What Councilmember Grower said is right on target. I'd just like to add that we spent quite a bit of time, Ms. Bromberg spent quite a bit of time taking a look at the cities around us to determine whether a new fee structure would be in line or not. And I think in pretty much all cases, we're right about in the average to just a little bit above some of them, I think, which keeps us competitive and covers the issues that Councilmember Grower's got. Just one question: if in the future more regulations come out and we have to go hire more people, because really that's what we're talking about here, is these are not additional expenses, they're staff that's on staff today. If we have to hire more people, this council would have the ability to change the rates again, wouldn't they?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
And I would like to add, Councilmember Tizer, that it would be in the best practice to review these fees on an annual basis, which we have not done for quite some time. So I would look forward to the future in that we review these fees whenever we review the budget. I think that would be our best practice. Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a hard time to understand the direct correlation between development, redevelopment, and fees. I understand that our neighbor cities who are, doing a lot of redevelopment or development, and they have even higher fees, doesn't stop that. So nobody really is proven here that there's a straight correlation between the amount of the fees and the amount of development or redevelopment. So it seems to me it's more like an urban myth, this correlation that nobody have been able to prove to me the straight correlation between that and just look around the cities who surround us also with very prosperous development, redevelopment, which much higher fees. So seems to me more like the urban myth than the real correlation between these fees and the amount of development or redevelopment that either could be, high density residential development, redevelopment, could be single home improvements, could be office. So if you look around, the amount of the fees and the amount of, development, I don't see any straight correlation. So, and nobody have been able to prove the straight correlation between the fees and the amount of development, redevelopment.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. Councilmember Grower.
I'm not going to sit here and debate this all night, but that sounds like a really fun experiment to raise our rates until people stop coming to this city. I'd like to make a motion to approve, please.
Councilmember Grower, it is customary that the Admin Finance Department council member make the motion, and so I will allow him to make that motion.
Thank you, Mayor, but on my generosity, I can let Councilmember Grower to go ahead. If you feel like running over, that's fine. In my generosity and understanding and comprehensive approach, I can let Mr. Grower motion carry forward if you, Mayor, decide to do it.
Well, as long as you are going to acquiesce, I'll go ahead and entertain the motion by Councilmember Grower. We've got a motion on the table. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Wilsey. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it's Councilmember Grower, Tizer, and Wilsey in favor. All those opposed, Councilmember Zapata. Next on the item is Community Development Department. Councilmember Palermo, who's not in attendance this evening, I would like to ask Councilmember Grower if he would present these items. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 4 is the approval of the final plat, Canopy Townhomes at 453 Atlanta Street. Ms. Bromberg.
Ms. Bromberg, before you speak, I would like to ask our city attorney, Mr. Davidson, to opine on what we need to consider in a final plat, what we are looking at, what we're not looking at.
So final plat is basically the conveyance of the things that will become City of Roswell's, like the streets, sidewalks, some drainage piping and so forth. It's not an approval of the project zoning. It's not approval of anything like that. It's just that they have installed the stuff. It's adequate to city standards, and the city is willing to accept it.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Ms. Bromberg.
Absolutely. And the only thing I will add to that is a part of my presentation tonight. This is for the Canopy Townhomes located at 453 Atlanta Street. There are 50 townhome units included in this. What council would be accepting tonight are two public roadways, Maplewood Drive and Elmwood Way. Those both have been constructed, along with the stormwater that's within the right-of-way. There are components of the stormwater that are private that would not be a part of that acceptance. There are also two private roadways or alleys that are included in that plat that are on the rear side of some of the units. In addition to that, there are improvements proposed along the Atlanta Street frontage. The one thing to point out that is slightly different than what Mr. Davidson said is that there are components of this that are not yet constructed. There are two reasons for that. One of those is that there is some sidewalk along Atlanta Street that has not been constructed yet due to a delay by the Georgia Department of Transportation on modifying the permit that they have issued for those improvements, and the developer is waiting on that approval before those improvements will be installed. Those elements, along with some sidewalk that is internal that will be built as the townhome units are constructed in order to not damage those during construction, are actually covered by a performance bond that the city has received. Any infrastructure that's within the public right-of-way that has been constructed and inspected is also covered by a maintenance bond. And those are also in our hands as well. Here's just a quick site plan of the plat itself showing the layout of the roads. The road entrance coming off of Atlanta Street forms sideways P, if you will. That is the public roadway. And then there's one other component that is public, and then the alley that's at the very north end of the development, and in between the buildings, kind of in the center of the image, are the two public roadways that I referenced earlier. Staff does recommend approval of the plat, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does council have any questions? Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So can you remind us the zoning code for this property?
I believe it's RTH, but I honestly would have to, DX, thank you.
DX, okay.
DX, yes.
Which stand by downtown mixed use, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and there's any mixed use in this project?
This is a townhome development only.
So my interpretation to your answer would be 100% residential?
Correct.
Okay, so that's good. That's good because today we're in front of a project. It's a perfect example of the minimum percentage for mixed-use projects required. Since there's nothing here, it's called mixed use or downtown mixed use, but we don't see any mixed use. I don't see, 100% residential doesn't get into my dictionary as a mixed use. So that we're in front of a perfect example of the need to have minimum percentage for mixed use projects on the zoning code that require mixed use. So just want to bring to the attention this example. Everybody pay attention because it's very interesting example to think about the minimum percentage for mixed use projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata. I would like to bring this back to what we're talking about today, and I appreciate your opinion on that. I'm sure other council members may have opinions on that as well. However, we are here tonight to approve the final plat, and from what I'm hearing from Ms. Bromberg, it does meet with staff approval. Are there additional comments from council?
Yeah.
Councilmember Tizer.
One hand, this is not easy. I just want to make sure I understand. We're just approving the plat. They've met all the requirements or bonded the ones that they've not been able to meet. And you said DX is what they're in. which can be 100% townhome, correct? So they've met all the requirements.
That
Thank
is
you.
correct.
Additional questions from council? Is there anyone in the public? Yes, ma'am.
Janet Russell, this is in my neighborhood. We've watched for probably almost 2 years this project under construction, and this construction project has blocked the sidewalk on Highway 9, what little that we have, for almost over a year. It's still blocked. They moved the silt fences back slightly, but with the power poles in the middle and the silt fences, it's impossible to walk on them. I have spoken with transportation 3 times. One was last fall when we took a walk, and the driveway entrance that goes in like this, here's the sidewalk and here's the sidewalk. They have failed to put ADA compliant curb cuts in. I have been told, oh, well, you have to wait. Once they put them in there, once they put in the sidewalks and finish the houses, then they'll put the curb cuts in. Now, who does that? I know she has mentioned, Ms. Blomberg, whatever, I'm sorry, I apologize, that we have GDOT and all this stuff. In the meantime, the people that live there that are trying to walk to anywhere have been prohibited. If you are handicapped, you're screwed. If you're trying to push a stroller, you can't get there. How much longer are we going to wait for these people to finish this project before we have a sidewalk? Across the street is a used car lot with broken blacktop concrete pipes sticking up. There is no sidewalk. There are no crosswalks for 2 miles. Well, 1.5 miles from river to the square, not one crosswalk. Nothing. So basically, this project has been given preeminence over the actual residents of the place because the city hasn't enforced walkability. You know that word everybody's talking about? We're so walkable? Well, we're not walkable. There's a big difference between within walking distance and walkable. And I'd like to see some action on that because I've seen handicapped people and I've seen a mentally challenged man who can't get down that sidewalk. I've almost stopped my car to help them. Barriers on both sides of the driveway, and I've been told to be patient. Be patient. My patience is done. It's been since last fall that the barriers have been up. There are no curb cuts. They are not ADA compliant, and I insist we make that happen before they put one nail in a house out there. The people that live there deserve to be able to walk on a sidewalk somewhere, and I challenge anyone up there to put Vaseline in your eyes and then try to walk down that sidewalk. Pretend you are the least among us, instead of driving by in your car with your cup holder and your AC blowing. I challenge you to do it because I know what you're going to say. Oh my God, she was right.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. I would like to ask Transportation and Community Development, is there any way we as an elected body can help to speed this up? I don't want to step on your toes, but I'm sure that Councilmember Grower and I would be more than happy to meet with GDOT. But I would also like to get an update on where we are with this process and why it's being held up by GDOT.
So the applicant believed that they had an approved GDOT permit in the fall and discovered that their permit was not approved, which is when those barricades are referred to, I believe, were initially installed. The applicant has gotten an approved GDOT permit. They are having to make a revision to it, and GDOT has honestly just taken a very long time through the entire review approval process because they can. They do have the permission to get the work done now, but they're just waiting on that final approval for the sidewalk installation so that they can. I do know that I spoke with the applicant earlier this evening, and as soon as they have that permission, they'll be able to start that work. But because GDOT has authority over that right-of-way until they have that approved permission for the revisions to the work within the right-of-way, they do not have authorization to start that work. It would not be accepted by the state nor the city at that point.
Thank you, Ms. Bromberg. I don't think Transportation has anything to add. You're very thorough. I would also, again, like to say that if you need a letter of support from me, if you would like Councilmember Grower and I or anyone else on council to meet with GDOT to try to push this along, because I do understand Ms. Russell's concerns, and it seems as though the applicant made a misstep, but they're trying to correct that, and GDOT is being GDOT, which is just a huge, huge ship that is difficult to right or turn. Thank you. Are there additional questions from council? Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Grower. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Councilmember Tizer. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it's Councilmember Grower, Tizer, and Wilsey. All those opposed? Councilmember Zapata. The motion carries. Back to you, Councilmember Grower.
Thank you, Mayor. This is item number 5, approval of a sidewalk cafe license for 942 Alpharetta Street for 2 sections of their sidewalk. This was deferred from the May 13th Mayor and Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this is the application for a sidewalk cafe license for 942 Alpharetta Street. The property is located at the corner of Elizabeth and Alpharetta in the red box on the map located on your screen. This is a survey of that same property indicating where they have their outdoor patio area now and a hatched area, and then the proposed space out in the front of the face of the building for their cafe license. The applicant does intend to use a total of 68 square feet within the right-of-way in 2 separate sections along Elizabeth Way. The first of those sections is 45 square feet and is located at the face of the building. The second section is located just to the side of that. So the 23 square feet that is in the front of the patio area that I pointed out in the survey. The applicant intends to place 4 2-top tables in these 2 areas for a total of 8 seats. It's, as you'll see on the next image, it's 3 tables at the face of the building and then 1 in the small area in front of the patio section. This is an image looking and seeing the patio section in the face of the building where that area would be located. After our last council meeting, staff has gone out and taken a number of photos. I've only presented some of them tonight to give you the pictures to show the space that is proposed to be designated for that cafe license. This is an image facing along Elizabeth Way back towards Canton Street with 942 is the white with the blue trim that you see in front of you. Up ahead is Local on North and their cafe license area that you see just beyond that sign. This is where we measured the width of the existing sidewalk from the face of the building. It did measure at 8 feet 2.5 inches wide, which does accommodate and match with the site plan that was presented to you with the 5-foot sidewalk area and the 3-foot for the table chained off section. Just for comparison, this is Local on North, which is immediately, as I mentioned earlier, just down Elizabeth Way from this location. Those are their existing poles that are 3 feet from the building with a 5-foot clear width between their poles and the width of their sidewalk. This is us measuring that to show that it is 5 feet to the face of those poles as required by code. As mentioned, this is covered under UDC section 9.7.15, specifically under paragraph B, use standards. The applicant does meet all the requirements included, but this was something that had come up in conversation during council before, which is regarding the minimum 5-foot clear pedestrian passage as measured between the face of the poles and the edge of the sidewalk. And they'll have 2.5 inches more than that based on the dimensions that we measured in the field. Staff does recommend approval of this cafe license and will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Bromberg. I have several questions, and let me just say this. I absolutely approve of cafes, sidewalk cafes. They're wonderful. We love them in Roswell. I was just in California, and they embrace them there as well. One of the concerns I've got has to do with our ADA compliance. We've got the Department of Justice hounding us that has required us to just pass a master plan for our ADA compliance. And I would like to ask Mr. Davidson to opine on this, because one of the issues we've got here, and I think we might have a solution to it, is that it is my understanding, and through previous conversations with other restaurants and sidewalk cafes in the city, that all of the business of serving food and drinks needs to be done within the chained off area. I asked Mr. Davidson to opine on this, and if you would jump in with this, Mr. Davidson, I would appreciate it.
When the mayor asked me to opine, I looked at a service aisle as is defined in several other states and cities. A service aisle is not included in that 5-foot area. And previous discussions amongst this council, when we first began the sidewalk cafes, they always prohibited service from outside the chained areas. And this one, in my discussions with the mayor, it does look like it would still be possible to get the 2 tables on the front if they came out the front door and came in to serve the 1 table, if they just moved 2 tables closer together towards the center of that area. If they moved the one in the front by the entrance door, moved it to the right, moved the one over by the patio further to the left, they could have 2 tables there, and the servers could actually come in and serve from behind the people to the tables instead of serving from the sidewalk. That would leave the 5-foot clear lane for passage. If there is a wheelchair and somebody walking by, basically that's your 5 feet would be taken up. Server would not impede any kind of flow of pedestrian traffic that way.
So, Mr. Davidson, would you please explain? So, for example, if we could allow the 2 tables, they could serve from each end of that without impeding the traffic. From a liability standpoint in the city, if someone had an ADA issue and we knowingly allowed this to happen, the city would be liable. If we tell the restaurants, you have to leave the 5-foot clear lane, and they do not do that and they impede the flow, then it would be a liability issue on the part of the restaurant. Is that correct?
That would be a violation of their license and would also possibly subject them to liability for not following what this council has directed, yes.
So we've got 2 different issues here. One is approval and protecting the city from liability. The other one is enforcement, and I don't think, just for the record out there, I don't know of anybody that's been complaining, enforcing, that is really going after the restaurants. I think by and large, most people are very patient with it. It's the joy and the success of having a vital pedestrian community. So, and it's also what can create angst for us. Does council have any questions? Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify then, tables plus service area will still leave the minimum required of sidewalk?
Yes. And if I may, Mayor, the tables that are proposed in this particular image are 2 feet across. So there's actually an extra 12 inches between the table and the chains. I know if you look at the local on North, I think their tables may even be slightly smaller than that, so that there is about an 18-inch gap between the chain and the tables. So it is possible that the configuration they currently are proposing could provide both. I think the stipulation that is being presented, that they need to be able to serve within the chains, being part of the approval, leaving it to them to how they are able to accommodate that might be of interest. I just wanted to point that out, that the tables as proposed do not take up the entire 3 feet of space that would be inside the chains. I wasn't sure if that was clear.
Thank you. Yes, it's clear, and I guess my question would be for the applicant, if they're here tonight, but would be whether or not they can deal with a smaller two-top, because they're definitely looking at a 24-inch two-top. And that's very tight to be serving food 12 inches. I would venture to say a lot of folks couldn't walk that front on. You would have to sidestep to serve. So my question would be, would the applicant prefer to lose a table, or would they prefer to make the two tops smaller than 24 inches? I don't know what the standard, the industry standard is. I have no earthly idea. So if it'd be okay, I'd love to hear from the applicant.
Hello, and good evening to everybody, Council and Mayor. So your question is, you want me to get a smaller table? Just a little smaller?
That would
so
be
we
an
could-
option, a narrower table.
Okay. I mean, we could do that, that's fine. If we get a smaller table, we could put all four, or you're saying
Yes.
we do? 18-inch table, 18 by 24 is fine.
Okay,
Yeah?
great.
Yeah, that'd be
I think
fine.
that's a perfect solution then.
And so your argument was more for the staff to be inside the chain?
Yes,
So we could serve from inside?
yes,
And that's no problem.
great.
Yeah, we could do that.
Thank you so much for working with us on that.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much.
Does
And-
council have any other questions for the applicant? Councilmember Grower?
I guess I'm just trying to figure out the easiest configuration here. Wouldn't it just be that one of the tables has to be narrower so that the server can access both ends of the configuration? I'm just trying to make this the most effective cafe we can while still staying within the rules.
Well, I personally think Ms. Bromberg had an excellent suggestion, which is we clearly define that service has to be conducted within the roped-off areas. And if the applicant is willing to work with us on it and be conscientious about making sure their servers aren't in the public right-of-way, I'm good with that.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Grower. Additional questions? Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. So, well, I have a more simplistic view, like what is the minimum required to have as a sidewalk? Then the rest, right there goes the chain, and then goes the table that the gentleman wants to put. Whatever kind of table he wants. I mean, I don't want to regulate what kind of table he's going to put. It's up to him. But it's very simple. I don't know. We have 8 foot minus, 5 foot is the minimum required. Okay, so the chain goes right there, and then inside the chain goes the service and the table. If you want to put round table, square table, rectangular table, it's up to him as long as everything is inside the chain, the service and the tables. So I don't want to get into what kind of table you can put there. I said, this is the space that you have for service and table, then it's up to you how
Right,
you want to use it.
you just want us to serve inside that chain?
Correct,
So we
yes,
don't
have to be served
intrude
inside
outside.
the chain, yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Zapata, and I agree with you completely. What I did want to do is make sure that we approved this in the right manner and that the applicant was willing to adjust and make changes and understand that service has to be done within that roped area. And I think we've accomplished that.
I think so. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any additional questions from council? You can have a seat, thank you. Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Not seeing any hands up or anyone approach. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the item as written, and just with the emphasis that all service will happen inside the chains and with all 4 tables as needed.
So would that become a condition, Ms. Bromberg?
It would, and I actually realized I have an extra slide I should have presented to you. There were 3 conditions that were recommended, and we would add that as a 4th. Per the stamped plan that was presented to you tonight, there also is a requirement for the berry and the furniture to match the pre-approved list because it is in the historic district. And then there would be the 2 chains, it'd be a double chain in order to meet the ADA requirements. And then the 4th condition would be that the service would have to be within those chains and that they must configure their tables to accommodate that.
Thank you, Ms. Bromberg. Is that your motion, Councilmember Grower?
Yes.
So we've got a motion by Councilmember Grower. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey and Councilmember Tizer. Councilmember Zapata, do you have a question?
Yeah, just want to have a clarification from the motion that will allow the minimum required feet for pedestrian on the sidewalk, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands, and it passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank the applicant for being patient with us. We're always trying to cross our Ts and dot our Is. Okay, the next item on the agenda is Environmental and Public Works, Councilmember Matt Judy. He's not in attendance this evening, so I would like to ask Councilmember Tizer if he would present that.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 6 is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with Tetra Tech for the design of maintenance improvements to the Roswell City Hall pond.
Mr. Skalsky.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as part of our stormwater permit for our municipal stormwater system, we have a number of requirements. One of them is to maintain ponds that are owned by the city. This item is to conduct maintenance on, or not to conduct, to design a maintenance plan for one of those ponds, which is the pond between City Hall parking lot and Forest Street. So that is what this item is for. It's being awarded or recommended for Tetra Tech, which is one of our standby engineering firms that we recently selected. They've done a few small assignments and are well suited to do this particular work. And this is work on an existing stormwater best management practice. We'd like to improve it through the maintenance process and are looking forward to seeing their recommendations on how to best utilize that asset going forward. Be happy to answer any questions if there are any. It's for the amount of $40,200 is the amount of the recommended contract.
Does council have any questions? Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and speak? Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mayor. Motion to approve. Item number 6.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Tizer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Grower. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously.
Thank you.
The next items on the agenda are City Attorney Report. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. The first item I have is the approval of a resolution to designate a special entertainment district for 35 Oak Street and to provide for a farm winery tasting room. Under the laws of the state of Georgia, mead is considered wine. We have a meadery that's opening at 35 Oak Street. They wish to have a tasting room under the laws of the state of Georgia. It would be considered a farm winery tasting room. In order to allow that, the city has to declare a special entertainment district. All this would do is allow them to bring their honey to the meadery and make their wine and sell their wine here.
That just struck me funny when you said bring your honey to the meadery. Does council have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe this question is for legal. Which other implication will have the designation of this area besides being able to bring the honey to the facility?
Nothing. This is solely for the purpose of allowing a farm winery tasting room. It says so in the resolution.
Okay, so we'll have any other implication or any other aspect? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Additional questions from council? Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward and comment? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Wilsey. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Grower. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously. Mr. Davidson.
The only other item I have is a recommendation for closure to discuss personnel litigation and real estate.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to go to closure.
Motion by Councilmember Grower. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tizer. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And it passes unanimously. We are adjourned.